Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you yet again for another Daily Dave. You know, the non-daily version, because it's not every day. But when I have something that's cool that I want to talk to you about and share with you, why wait? Right? Why wait? No, it's the Daily Dave. I'm glad you're here. I have a little clip from a podcast where yours truly was mentioned, and that makes me all warm and fuzzy inside, and I really wanted to share with you. And it's so cool when you hear your name mentioned on a podcast. It's like the coolest feeling ever, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, it's kind of nice when people do something nice. And that's what we do here on the podcast. We love to share all the niceness and podcast and avoid all the judgment, people. Right? Are you with me? I see you in the back. Yeah. We're not here to judge. We're here to support, build each other up, and grow our podcast. So, not just going to make an episode to just play the message and hear me mentioned on a podcast. It's kind of self-serving, Dave. Yeah, no, I have a question for you that I'm going to ask you after hearing this little clip from a podcast. A question that I want you to consider very carefully and come up with your own answer. Okay? It's kind of your answer matters to the following question, which I will share with you in a moment. But first, here's a little shout out from PT Russell on Journaling with PT, your podcast. Such a great person and a great ally. She's really great. And I'd love for you to go check out her show. Links in the show notes. You know how we do things around here. But here's what she said about the How to Podcast series. Oh, again, I'm so happy. But here you go. Here's PT's thoughts about the How to Podcast series. Here we go. PT, over to you, PT.
Another podcast of note is How to Podcast with Dave Campbell. And if you're interested in learning how to podcast, he breaks it right down. He breaks it right down for you and teaches you all of the basics. He has a very extensive catalog of information. So if you wanted to check it out, I would advise you to do so. I've learned a lot from him. He's sponsored the Journaling with PT podcast as well with Buy Me a Coffee. He bought me a couple coffees. He bought me, well, I put it as teas because I don't really drink coffee. Coffee makes me crazy. So decaffeinated tea or tea without caffeine, it's perfect, like chamomile or whatever. One of my favorites. But anyways, How to Podcast with Dave Campbell. I've learned a great deal from him.
So there you go, PT. I saw your message on one of the episodes, and you said you gave me a shout out, so here I am, thanking you for that. And a tea donation to PT. That makes sense. It just all makes sense. So there you go. Now I know you're a tea lover. I love that. So watch for some more teas, PT, coming your way. I love supporting other podcasters. Thank you, PT. I really appreciate that. Very kind of you. Yes. So my question, Dave. Get to the question, Dave. Where is the question? Yes, here's the question. Okay, are you ready for this? Once you put your thinking caps on, you remember that in school when your teacher used to say that? Everyone put on your thinking caps. Well, I want you to put on your thinking caps and answer this question. If you woke up tomorrow and you went on to your podcast host and there was absolutely no statistics, like it's been removed, it's no longer a part of podcasting, no more stats, no more listeners, where they listen, how long they listen, no numbers, no episode listens, no total listens, nothing. All of the stats went away tomorrow. Everything's gone. All of that measurement, all of those things that we obsess over as podcasters, where we have to go check our stats every 5 minutes to see if we're growing or not. Imagine if all of that went away tomorrow and would never come back again. I'm curious, would you keep podcasting? Like, is that the only thing about podcasting that brings you joy, is looking at your numbers grow? Is that the one thing that frustrates you as a podcaster when you don't see them grow? Is it your obsession? Do you check your stats hourly, by the minute, daily, weekly, whatever. If all of the stats associated to podcasting went away tomorrow, would you hang it up? Would you get rid of your mic, close up shop, stop podcasting if stats went away? Interesting question. Goes back to motivation, goes back to your why, goes back to everything we do in podcasting. If there was no stats, would you keep podcasting? It's an interesting question for you to consider. I really want you to sit on this a little bit. I want you to think about this and go, okay, so there's no more stats. How would I know that I got engagement from my audience? Well, as an example, PT just did a little shout out on my show thanking me for this show. So that's great feedback, right? So someone's listening and they're mentioning my podcast. I'm here mentioning PT's podcast. Do you kind of see what's happening here? Now, yes, I would love to know that you're listening. Yes, I'd like to know where you are in this great big world of ours. Yes, that brings me a lot of joy to know that you're getting value from the podcast. But if all of the stats, imagine YouTube. Oh, would YouTube crumble if all of the stats and listening and all of that just disappeared overnight and never returned? There would be people hugging their pillow in the fetal position on the floor sobbing because they don't know how many people are interacting with their videos on YouTube. We are bound by this number and the pursuit of a higher number at all times. And I wonder what would happen if it just all went away. What would happen? How would we measure success as a podcaster? And it seems like, I think podcasters would much rather get a message from a real listener than to see a big number on their page of stats. To actually hear from the voice of the listener, to hear through email or SpeakPipe or a buy me a coffee, or for PT, a buy me a tea, something where engagement is demonstrated from listener to host and from host to listener, to get beyond the mic and start talking to people in person or virtually through Zoom. Would you be okay with no stats and instead having constant contact with your audience and people reaching out to you like PT, leaving you a shout out on her show and mentioning how great you are as a podcaster? Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that be okay? Could you give up stats if you had that instead? I kind of like the idea. And we did it at the beginning of the year. We challenged you to go with a whole month of January with no stats. Don't look at them for the whole month. Do you remember that? Right? How challenging was that? Go for a whole month and not even look at your stats once. Wow. That would be tough. So I'm just wondering, if podcast stats went away tomorrow morning, would you be devastated? Would you pivot? Would you focus on interaction with your audience instead of tracking how many listens you had? I wonder. I really, really wonder, because we put a lot of faith in that number as it's a true number, and it's really not that true. Like, it's not a fact. Those numbers aren't facts. They are estimates. So I have an opportunity for a guest to come on my show for the How to Podcast series, and right away they ask, what's your numbers? I need to know your listeners. How many do you got? And when I look at my numbers, I'm not ashamed of them by any means, but I know it's only a snapshot of the audience, and that people are picking up this podcast in different ways. So what I have gives me an idea, but I would say to you, when you look at your stats, and we've talked about this before, I would say to you that from episode to episode, you should see some kind of growth happening. It could be just one new listen. So last episode you had 5 listeners. The next episode you have 6. You're on the right path. You see, you just grew your audience. And you're like, but Dave, that's 6 people. Yeah, that's 6 people have chosen you. And then your next episode, you get 7. You just keep building. And then it gets to a point where the numbers, instead of going up by single digits, they go up by double digits and then triple digits. It just happens. And it's nothing that you did to force it. You just show up. You just do good podcasts, share great content, love on your audience, be consistent, do your best. And when you listen to PT's episode, she's mentioning that she's taking a break. She's taking a little break and she's going to come back and do more podcasts in the future. So great. Take a break. Tell your audience, but at least communicate with them and find a way to do that. I suggest the SpeakPipe link because it's free. It doesn't cost you any money to get started with SpeakPipe. Throw that in your social media, your email, website. Give your audience a way to reach out to you. That's a form of engagement. A Buy Me a Coffee is a form of engagement. Again, free to set up. Let your audience say thank you to you for all the hard work you do. You do a lot of work to make this happen. Let them say thank you. Don't stop them from that. Even if you don't need the money, don't stop your audience from giving you engagement through a coffee donation. It's a great way for them to say thank you. Set it up. It doesn't cost you any money to set this up. And then put it out in your show notes, put it on your website, and just leave it there. You'll be surprised at who will respond when you give them the option to do so. Ask questions of your audience. Do something that inspires them to respond. And I'm going to do that right here at the end. I'm going to do something that I'm asking for your response to know you've listened to the end of my show. Again, we've talked about this before on the How to Podcast series, that listening to the end of the episode is one of the best ways to support your favorite podcaster, because it tells all of the apps and all of the things that happen behind the scenes, this is a good podcast. So listening to this point is a great way to help your podcaster grow their show. Just by listening to the end. It is probably the best stat that you want to see is your listeners continuing to the end of the episode. And you being here, you're helping that to come true. So my ask here at the end is not to do a rate or review, none of that stuff. I'm asking you to respond with this word, either by email, SpeakPipe, whatever. I want you to respond with this word. Secret word at the end of the podcast, everyone. Are you ready? Super secret. Here it is. It is PT. The letter P and the letter T. PT for our message earlier. I would love to hear PT come back to me from you listening to the show, and that tells me you made it to this point, and I thank you for that. Thanks for being here for the How to Podcast series. PT, thank you so much for your message. I'll leave a link to PT's podcast. Everything in the show notes as always. Thank you for being here. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Be out there. Podcast. Show up. Do your thing. Take care.